efficient at burning and oxidizing fuels, and that will compound later in their programming, and then we don't have to use as much conditioning at that point, and we can just focus on lifting and short metcons, that's kind of the model of RBT, right? You come in and you do 15 or 20 minutes of strength work, and then we do 15 or 20 minutes of metcons, right?
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, and for me, I think for group training, that is the optimal way of doing things, right? Because you're getting multiple different strength qualities, multiple different conditioning qualities too. I think what I would like with a group training is you come in and you do 15 to 20 minutes of some type of specific lifting, resistance training. So whether that's hypertrophy or max strength or whatever, then you do short metcon, and then you finish off with some type of aerobic activity. And we look at the segments of time as being, let's look at it like in money, right? You have to spend money to make money. So if I have $100, how much of that money am I going to spend for each quality? So if it's somebody that's coming in and maybe we have a group of people that are kind of beginners and they're not really in very good shape, maybe we spend $15 on resistance training, maybe we spend $15 on metcons, and then we spend $30 or $40 on some type of metcon that's more aerobically based, right? And then as they get better, then we spend less money on the aerobic stuff, and we spend more on the metcon, and we spend more on the resistance training. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So like there will be a module on conditioning that we'll talk about in later modules that will basically lay out different types of conditioning and what they stimulate, what are the outcomes and the adaptations. That way when you guys are working with people, you can make a predictability module of where this client should be and how fast they should adapt to those specific protocols, right? Now, one of the problems that we have is like we don't really have a weight loss problem, right? It's fairly simple for someone to come in and they come into RBT and they lose a lot of weight really fast, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys are waking up now. I think you guys haven't had enough coffee today, right? We don't really have a weight loss issue. Losing weight is not that difficult, and most people will lose weight. The problem is we have a weight loss maintenance issue. We tend to drive people too hard and give them unreasonable things, and then they can't maintain it over time. So what we need to focus on is how do we create sustainable systems where people understand how to lose weight, but they also understand how not to regain it, okay? Because that's the biggest issue. When you look into the research, only dieting and training only has about a 5% success rate. And the reason is, like, you get 100% of the people losing weight, 95% of them will put it back on. And that's where we're really having the issues. We need to figure out how we keep people from binging. And it's, in my experience, people are being pushed too hard too quickly with no exit strategy. So we want to start thinking about, can we push our clients really hard? And can we push them with a really hard caloric deficit? Yes, but we can't do that for a long time. Like, that's not a forever thing. And if we do that for a long time, let's say we put someone on something like that for 12 to 16 weeks, the repercussions are going to be metabolic adaptations where they're going to have a lowering in their metabolic rate when they're going to have a lowered exercise metabolic rate, so they're now not burning as many calories while they train, so then they therefore need more training, and then their food isn't having the same result, so we have to give them less and less food. And then we get to a point where the discrepancy of the caloric deficit is so large that now we're getting metabolic issues like metabolic syndrome. We start having people's hair falling out, their mitochondria is not working correctly. So this is the stuff we want to start thinking about. How do we change this? Right? And I'm big into not appealing to extremes, like trying not to do really extreme things unless it's for something that requires very extreme things like bodybuilding, which most of your clients aren't going to be bodybuilders, so we want to, and most of them aren't going to be high-level CrossFit athletes or anything like that. Most of them just want to feel better and look better and lose a little bit of body fat, right? So we kind of have to reframe our vision of what our client actually wants versus what we're looking to give them. Okay, so firstly, we have to set realistic goals. And to set realistic goals and to give people enough time to get to their goals, we have to understand what the research says on rates of fat loss and rates of muscle gain. So what's a realistic rate of fat loss for most people? What's a good range of like body weight per week?
Half a kilo to a kilo a week, depending on size.
Okay. Yeah, and it depends on size. So instead of saying, let's not use an absolute number, why don't we use a percentage? So why don't we say around 0.5% of their body weight up to 1%? And that's on average a week, right? Because when people first come in, if you have someone that's not doing anything, let's say it's 2 days after New Year's Eve and someone's put on 7-8 kilos over the holidays and they're like, okay, I'm going to get my shit together and I'm going to get this off. They come in and they haven't been doing anything and they've been overfeeding. Now we put them on a diet. They start getting better sleep. We start working on lifestyle. They start training. They're going to have a massive, rapid weight loss the first few weeks. So one thing I encourage you guys to do is to start talking to people about averages. And knowledge is power. So when you're talking to your clients, you should be educating them as much as possible and also starting to pre-frame the narrative on what they should expect. So if I'm dealing with a client, so let's say Mary Muffin Top comes in and she's not been taking care of herself and she starts a structured weightlifting program, conditioning program, and nutritional protocol, and also lifestyle modifications, it's not going to be unheard of for her to lose a lot of weight rapidly, okay? Especially if you're doing like a 21 or 28 day type of challenge, because when you do a 21 to 28 day challenge, it increases the focus of the client and they actually go really hard. But what we also want to tell them is, hey, weight loss is not linear. So you're going to have days where you're high and days where you're low. We want to look at this on averages, and this is what you should be averaging out. So if I have a guy that's 100 kilos, I'm going to tell him, realistically, I need you averaging out to about 500 grams to 1,000 grams a week. So some weeks you might do more. You might lose 2,000 grams a week. Some weeks you're going to lose less, but if we average this out over 16 weeks, this is the amount of fat loss I'm looking for, right? So we can try to push that faster. The only problem is when you start pushing things faster, now you start sacrificing some lean body mass, which for me is not really that acceptable because lean body mass is very slow to come back on. Now, if we look at the other side of that with hypertrophy, what is a good amount of grams that somebody could put on with dry muscular weight per week? What's a conservative value without putting on too much fat?
Would that depend on training age?
It actually could depend on training age, but also biological age. But if we look at like
somebody that's new to training is going to put on more muscle mass a lot faster than someone that's been training, say, 5 or 10 years, right?
Yes, that's true. However, too, is it totally muscular weight, or are we talking lean body mass? Because those are two different things, right? If we look at dry muscular weight, you look at like about 5 to 6 kilos a year is about right. Yes, you can push that higher, and some people will. But when we look at the average of people, that's probably going to be more realistic. So we look at say 10 to 15 pounds. I would say probably around 4 to 5, maybe even 6 kilos of dry muscular weight. But keep in mind that dry muscular weight also holds other things. Like what else does your muscle hold? Well, water, sodium, glycogen, things like that. So as they increase their dry muscular weight, then they're also going to have more capacity to store carbohydrates and also to store water. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would personally rather lowball them a little bit, so that you're under promising and over delivering. Like if I tell somebody, science says on average 5 kilos a year of dry muscular weight if you're natural, so we're going to bank on that. Well, if he gains 7 kilos a year, now I look like an all-star, don't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'd rather not say, hey man, you could probably put on 10 kilos of muscle mass, and then then they get like 5, and now you look like a schmuck, right? And now you've lost all the trust of your client. Then you're like, oh well, sorry. So I would always rather over deliver, right? And if we over deliver, we know these ranges kind of go on the low end. Now there are some times where I will inflate a value. So like especially with women. Women tend to view weight loss only by the scale, like most women. Like if you're a personal trainer, you're shaking your head and you're like, oh, that's not true. But like put yourself in the mind of your client. And most women are obsessed with the scale with weight loss, and most men are obsessed with the scale for muscle gain. And we can't really use one metric to gauge that, right? Because if we look at men, they'll go in a year-long bulking phase. And at first it kind of goes really well. They're eating pretty clean. They're doing their workouts. Then they start skipping a few workouts. And they start eating Macca's and KFC. And then one day they look in the mirror and they go, oh, shit, I look good in clothes, but, man, I look like a fat, tubby bastard when I take my shirt off. And then they end up going extreme the other direction, and they start over-dieting, and then they end up looking worse than when they first started. Women tend to go the opposite way, as they just focus on the scale and they don't focus on anything else, and then they diet off a ton of muscle, and then they just look like a smaller version of themselves, and their body hasn't really changed. So when we think about that type of thing, what are the repercussions of different dieting protocols? What would you guys say in short term? What is most likely the best dietary protocol for losing fat? Someone take a stab.
Something that can be adhered to long term.
Yeah, something that can be adhered. But if you could adhere to anything, what would most likely be the best style of dieting that would increase oxidation rates and improve metabolic flexibility?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so in a short term, a lower carb diet is probably going to be best. Okay. Now, in a long-term scenario, it doesn't really matter. Like if you look at the research of diets that last 12 months or more, high carb, low carb, doesn't really matter. But you got like RBT is not known for, you're known for getting fast results, right? So if we look at, do I have to pick a single diet for somebody for the rest of their life? No. What if I was doing a 28-day kind of jump start to their training? Most likely I'm going to put them on a lower carb diet and then have them train really hard and then work on their sleep and lifestyle. That's pretty much correct, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So now let me ask you that. What's the repercussion of putting someone on a low carb diet if you don't tell them what to expect when they do their carb up?
Weight gain.
Weight gain, right? And if it's, let's say it's a woman, right? Let's say it's Mary. Mary comes in and she does a 28-day lower carb or a 21-day lower carb diet, and you haven't told her like, hey, we're going to do like a 2 or 3 day refeed. I need you to eat these carbohydrates and I need you to drink more water. That weight's going to go up, and when she gets on the scale, what's going to happen?
She's going to freak out.
That's it. She's going to go to cray-cray town, and she's going to freak out. And because she thinks, now she's going to think that carbs make her fat, and you're never going to be able to get her to eat carbs ever again, right? So we always have to pre-frame everything and make sure we're educating our clients saying, hey, I need you to eat these carbs because if you stay low carb for a long time, it's going to wreck your hormonal health. And it's also going to wreck your performance. So we're going to periodically do a carb load. And now, so if we think about how much weight you should expect to gain, depending on the physiology textbook, they're going to have different values. So every gram of carbohydrate will carry around 2.6 to 4 grams of water. So let's just take that 100-kilo guy because it's a lot easier to do the math. So I got a 100-kilo guy, and let's say he eats 500 grams of carbs for his carb up. And what I would do is I always tell them the high side of what they should expect. So if I go 1 gram of carb and 4 grams of water, I'm going to multiply that by 5. That's going to give me about 2.5 kilos. And I'm also going to I'm going to think when your clients have been dieting and they get a carb up, are they more likely to eat really clean or go out and eat really dirty?
Dirty.
Oh, yeah. They're going to go eat pizza. They're going to, because they've been doing really well. They've lost some weight. And in their mind, they're like, well, I deserve it. So you look at that's 2.5 kilos just based off the water and the carbs. And then I say, okay, you're probably going to carry a bunch of sodium with that because they're probably going to go out and eat a lot of high sodium foods. So it's not going to be, out of this world to think that you gain like 3.5 to 5 kilos after a refeed. So, but as long as I tell them that and they understand that and that the weight will come right back off when we go back to low carb, you can avoid going to crazy town with them, right? So we set the realistic goals based on, what is the research, anecdotal evidence, and in the research, what does it say? What are the time limits? So we look at, for muscular gain, we're looking at 125, 150 grams of weight per week without gaining too much fat. If we look at fat loss, 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week, and that's pretty good averaged over time.
Would you say when you're dieting, is it better to have like one refeed day a week or a cheat day per week, or like carb cycle, or stick it like maintenance carbs throughout the 7 days?
Well, the thing is, we don't really know. When I show you guys at the end, I've got some stuff on intermittent dieting, meaning like taking diet breaks. I personally I like a weekend refeed. I like going 5 days or 6 days, like say Sunday through Friday, low carb. And when I talk about low carb, I'm not talking about like ketogenic. I'm talking about what is low carb for that person. And, for myself, low carb for me is, around 100, 125 grams of carbs. If I'm dealing with a guy who's a natural ectomorph that wants to lean out a little bit, low carb for him might be 300 or 400, right? So we have to start looking.
It's always better to go back-to-back days at maintenance or, say, refeed day rather than one, or it doesn't matter?
Well, it doesn't really matter. I would say this: guys tend to refill glycogen faster than girls. Like most guys, if I give you 900 grams of carbs, most guys will replenish muscle glycogen in about 24 hours. Girls can take up to 3 days, right? So, and it's not really that necessary in a fat loss scheme to replenish all your muscle glycogen, but just to give that diet break where you replenish some of it, right? So even if you're looking at, I like to do things in a 24-hour period instead of just thinking a day. So what I'll typically do is I'll have them do low carb. So let's say low carb, 50 to 80 grams or whatever it's going to be for that person. If they're training really hard with giant sets and that type of thing, I'm probably going to give them even more carbs as low carb, even up to 150, 200, because depending on how much volume you're doing in your training, a massive workout session like what you guys do at RBT, it has the potential to decrease muscle glycogen one session by 50%. Now, every subsequent session your body tends to hold on to more glycogen. So let's say you get a drop in 50%, then you're down to 60%, then you're down to 50%. So it kind of drops off towards the end of it, and then you start replenishing. And I'll give you guys, I'll just give it to you now so I don't forget. If you want to look at how much glycogen someone can potentially hold, you take their body weight in kilograms, multiply it by 30. So a 100-kilo guy times 30 is 3,000. Divide that by 4, and that's roughly around 750 grams of carbs. And it's not exact science, but it's pretty close.
Can you say that again? Body weight times 4. Wait, body weight. Sorry?
Yeah, body weight times 30.
Times 30 divided by 4.
Divided by 4, and that gives you a rough ballpark of liver glycogen and also muscular glycogen. And also realize, too, you're not going to store all that. Some of that's going to be oxidized. So you can probably push that a little higher. And if somebody's really depleted, if you have 2 or 3 weeks of low carb, there's going to be a super compensation effect. So that guy that had, a 100-kilo guy, and you're looking at 750 grams, you might want to add like 20 or 30% on top of that, give them somewhere around 950 to 1,000 grams of carbs, because some of that's going to be oxidized in the mitochondria. And also you're going to allow some for super compensation. But that's not to say that you should give somebody that many carbs. That's to say you've got a lot of wiggle room. Like if you're giving somebody 400 or 500 grams of carbs, that's probably plenty, but you could potentially go up closer to 900 to 1,000 and not have any spillover. And when you're doing refeeds, what you want to most likely refeed someone on is carbohydrate. That's going to give the best response for their hormones. That's going to help increase leptin, which helps control the appetite. It's going to reset their metabolism. Depending on how many days you're going low carb, the more days you go low carb, the longer you have to refeed. So if I'm going 5 days low carb, I could do a two-day refeed, and that's going to be fine. If I'm going 3 weeks low carb, I'm probably going to want to do a week at maintenance. And that maintenance, I want to crank the carbs back up to get the maintenance calories. So at the end of the day, the main thing, guys, is to do no harm. Like, my goal is to get someone to perform well, to get stronger, to grow muscle, to look better naked, to lose body fat without having horrible metabolic consequences at the end, right? Because when they have metabolic consequences at the end, it's very difficult to pull them out of that. And this is what I do. I get at least one person a week that some transformation guy has screwed up, and now I have to fix them. And the problem is, like, what it takes somebody to do, like, if you can screw somebody up in 12 weeks, it can take me 12 months to fix them. And the problem is, most people don't want to spend 12 months fixing themselves. And so I would rather, not mess them up at all. Okay, so if we look at an optimal protocol, if you've trained any athletes, you'll understand the concept of a GPP period versus an SPP. So SPP is specific physical preparation. So if I'm training, let's say I'm training and since I'm doing training for jiu-jitsu now, I'll just use myself. I've got a competition in June, right? I'm going to have to do specific training for that competition. But I can't just jump into specific training. I have to do a period of GPP work first, which means general physical preparedness. I have to get my body ready for the rigorous training that it's going to take to actually compete at a high level. So when you look at just general population clients, this is something no one really talks about. I don't think anybody's ever talked about that until we started talking about it, as far as your client comes to you and says, I've got these 3 goals. I want to put 25 kilos on my squat. I want to lose 10 kilos of body weight. I want to take a solid shit. I haven't taken a solid shit in a year, right? This is like specific wants and desires that they want. That's their goal. But when you start measuring people's metrics, and I've been getting some text messages from some of you guys when I came out and spoke to you. You guys have been taking some metrics and using some of the protocols, and some of you guys are like mind blown about how quickly it works and how your clients are getting better results by giving them what they need first versus what they want, right? And as the coach, you have to have the courage to tell your client, hey, I know this is what you want, but looking at your metrics, you're not sleeping, you're not pooping correctly, you have digestive issues, you've got all these issues going on. I need to fix this first before I go for your specific goals. But what's nice about this is if somebody comes into you and they're really unhealthy, they have high resting heart rate, they're not sleeping, they have digestive issues, they have high blood pressure or super low blood pressure, if you can get them healthier and get those metrics better, they by default will lose body fat. They will by default get better conditioning. They will by default start sleeping better. Does that make sense, right? Like, we don't have to give them specific protocols for their goals at first. We just need to get them healthy. Then when you move to the specific protocols, their results are much faster, right? So we want to start thinking about having that GPP period if your client comes in and they're really in the trenches. So we'll talk about the metrics here in a bit, but we want to focus on getting metrics in order. If you have somebody that comes in and has stage 2 hypertension, the last thing you want to do is have this guy doing heavy squats and doing things that is going to raise his blood pressure. Because what that's going to do is it's going to do is cause a sympathetic response that's going to make the blood pressure go higher. And at the end of the day, I've never in 20 years had someone come to me and say, yeah, I'd like to lose 10 kilos and I'd like to have a stroke or a heart attack. That'd be pretty sweet. That's not something that ever happens. I've never had a woman come to me and say, you know what, I'm tired of having a period. Can you get rid of my period? Those aren't really goals that people have. So a lot of people that come to us already having those issues. If we can fix those issues first, then their specific training will get a lot better, right? And so what we want to do is we want to give them the minimum effective dose, okay? We want to build their work capacity and their ability to train harder and harder over time. And at the same time, we also want to build their calories. So we want to try to get our client eating as many calories as they can and doing as much work as they can. And we want to improve their metabolic flexibility, meaning metabolic flexibility means I can eat carbs and fats and I can utilize them both for energy very easily, and I've got the flexibility to do so. The easiest way to fix metabolic flexibility is stress management, building cardiac output or aerobic fitness, building an aerobic base, and going on a lower carb diet. If you have someone do that for, say, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe in really bad cases up to 10 to 12 weeks, it's not really going to matter what they eat after that. As long as they match their protein and keep the protein high and they get enough fluids and they match their calorie goal, they can eat fat or carb, and they're still going to be able to see success. Right? But a lot of people are coming to you guys, they've got insulin resistance, they can't utilize carbohydrates, they're convinced that carbohydrates are making them fat, and the problem is it's not the carbohydrates, it's their body is in a position where it can't utilize the carbohydrates appropriately. Right? So you get a guy that comes in, he's got high triglycerides, high blood pressure, high waking heart rate, poor HRV, not sleeping. The easiest way to start fixing some of this is to drop the carbs to a level where they can actually utilize the carbs, dropping it down to just fruits and veggies for a small amount of time, get their aerobic fitness up, get them sleeping again, get them feeling well, take their pain away. Then when you start adding more and more food, more and more training, now they've got a compounded, they get compounded results, and they get better a lot faster. So what we're going to do is we measure. So we take metrics, we assess what those metrics mean, we create a program for these guys, and then we adapt. Now, how do we do this in group training? So if you guys have people, are you able to, on the fly, switch someone's exercises during group training? Let's say somebody comes in.
Do that.
What's that?
Yeah, we do have time to do that if they need the changes through the session.
Yeah. So you've got squats today, and you notice that 5 people, their squats are just terrible. They're awful. They're twisting. They can't go to depth. They're getting massive butt wink. It's hurting their lower backs. It only takes a couple of minutes to say, hey, I don't want you guys squatting. You guys are going to do front squats, or you guys are going to do hill elevated back squats, or you're going to do hill elevated front squats, or you're going to do a split squat. Like, you've got the ability to change that on the fly. So if that's the case, you also have the ability on the fly to say, hey, I don't think 5x5 is for you. Not right now. Your metrics don't look good. So when you do the group training, what I want you to do is I want you to do split squats at 12 to 15 reps instead. Is that an easy thing for you guys to implement?
Yeah, it will be.
Yeah, because here's the thing. When we start, because we'll talk about the autonomic nervous system soon, and when we look at the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic branch, a lot of your clients are living in that sympathetic state. So when they come in to train, what's going to drive that sympathetic state harder? Lots of heavy loading and neural work, and then lots of really high intense cardio, right? So you don't have to change what you're doing in the workout, other than maybe I change the rep ranges to do a little bit higher reps. And then maybe I also tell them not to push so hard on some of their Metcon stuff, and then let them know, like, I need you to go a little bit, not go near as hard, and then we're going to build your ability to go hard over the next few weeks. Is that something that's doable?
Yeah, I think we could definitely do it. It'd just be a little bit harder trying to get them to understand why we're doing it. So we should take time to sit down with them maybe after the class and explain. During the class, it's a 45-minute class, so it's pretty intense. You won't be able to explain that in 2 minutes to them.
That's right. So let's say, like, after the class, hey, I want to see you 5 people. I want to explain something. Let me go up to the whiteboard and show you this stuff. Like, I'm concerned with some of the metrics you guys have and some of your ability to do some of this work, so I'm going to modify it. So next time you come in, I want you to change the rep range, and I want you to switch these couple of exercises. Okay? And so that's kind of like been a lot of people are getting stuck on, how do I do this in the terms of group training, because it's easy to do when you're one-on-one or you're semi-private. It's a little bit harder to do when you're trying to manage 30 people training at one time. So if you guys are educating your clients and letting them start learning how to auto-regulate, teach them the stuff I'm teaching you, teach your clients, right? And then they'll be able to auto-regulate that, which makes your coaching a lot easier. If they're like, okay, my squat doesn't look good, I'm going to go ahead and switch to split squat, and then maybe they come to you and they say, hey, I'm not really feeling the squat. Can I do split squats? And then you can just say, yep, thumbs up or thumbs down or whatever. And then they're like, hey, I've been feeling pretty stressed out. I'm going to double the reps, because I don't want that neural loading. I want to do something a little bit more metabolic. So it should be fairly easy. It's just going to take some time to integrate into your systems. So when we look at stress, is stress good or is stress bad?
Depends.
Ooh, I would say this is not even an it depends type of talk, right? It's necessary. Like without stress, your body can't adapt, and without adaptation, you're going to die. So the thing is, what we need to think about is mitigating chronic stress and making sure that we change our clients' perception of stress, and also making sure if they're willing to come in and train with you guys 4, 5, 6 hours a week, they need to be counterbalancing that stuff at home with things that will then drive parasympathetic response. And that's been one of the hardest things over the last few years of trying to convince clients that, look, I know you're coming in here, you're training really hard, but I really need you to go get a massage or go to a float tank or, do an infrared sauna or meditate or journal or get a hobby or whatever. It seems to be that most general population, they don't have a problem coming in and beasting themselves at the gym. They have a hard time trying to figure out how to get more time to do things to take care of themselves. But I think part of the issue is that clients just aren't being educated enough on why they need to counterbalance all of that high intensity exercise with more rest and recovery type things. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but then that's our job, isn't it? It's our job to say, hey, look, man, you're doing really well in your training. However, if you want better results and longer lasting results, I need you to do a couple of things at home. So some of the things that we have our clients do is we'll do like an electronic sunset. So we'll tell them when the sun goes down, the electronics go down, read a book, draw, find something that you can do before bed. And in a lot of cases where we've had people that they have not been able to sleep much at all forever and ever, you get them to start do some things where they don't utilize technology and electronics at night, and all of a sudden they're falling asleep and they're staying asleep all night. And if we're not sleeping, we're not recovering at all. So there's little things that your clients can do at home, but we have to be writing that into their programs. Like that should be part of program design, not just sets, reps, time under tension, rest, order of exercise, doing hard work, being intense. But we also have to think about, that yin side of the equation, that least mode side of the equation, that for every session that you're coming in here and beasting yourselves, you need to go home and do a session of some type of recovery, whether that's headspace guided meditation, whether that's, taking a long bath, whether that's drawing, whatever your client does and enjoys doing, because your clients just simply don't take care of themselves. And they think that by coming in and training with you guys, that like that's how I take care of myself. But training is an additional stressor that we then have to try to mitigate with recovery modalities. So what is stress? So stress, your body wants to stay at homeostasis. Stress is anything that throws the body out of that homeostasis. If you guys don't know who Dr. Robert Sapolsky is, I highly recommend that you at least read his book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, and I would encourage you to get all of your clients to read that book. It's not super technical. It's written in a way that even Gen Pop with no science background can understand. If you can get them more educated on why you want them to do certain things, you're going to have a lot more buy-in for them to actually do those things, right? But yeah, for you guys, Dr. Robert Sapolsky, for me, he's the Mac Daddy of stress response. He was one of the first guys to go to Africa and basically watch baboons and look at their hierarchy. Their hierarchy is very similar to humans. The diseases they get are very similar to humans. And what he did was he observed them and lived with them for years, and then he would dart them and then look at their stress hormones. And he was one of the first people to link an elevation in stress hormones also showing an elevation in disease state. He also has, if you go to YouTube, he has a really good 20-something hour free lecture. It's basically his entire class at Stanford University on the biology of behavior, why your clients act the way they do, and what does science say about the reasonings they do that, what we can do about it. I think it's fantastic. If you've got time, you're doing your cardiac output, go to YouTube and check that out. Okay, now when we talk about stress, we look at dose making the poison, right? So we said stress is necessary. It's not good nor bad. It's essential to making the body work and to making the body adapt or maladapt. And we look at stress, we look at the accumulation of the sum of all the stressors as being allostatic load. And that's not just bad stress, it's also good stress. So have any of you guys jumped out of an airplane before?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm trying to figure out how many of you are clinically insane, because that just makes no sense to me. That's why a plane has seats, right? You're not supposed to jump out. But every class, I have 4 or 5 people that they've jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. Now, did you do that by choice, or did someone throw you out of the plane?
A little bit of both. Well, I made the choice to do it, but I was pretty much thrown out the plane.
So it sounded like a good idea until you were standing out looking down and going, this is not a good idea.
Yep.
So when you're standing, think about you're standing and you're looking down, and what are you feeling at that moment?
Just fear.
Fear,
Massive
right?
amounts of fear, yeah.
And you're feeling like butterflies in your stomach, you're shaky, your
Yep.
palms are sweaty, you know, it's like an Eminem song, right?
Yep.
And you're like, this is a horrible idea, and then you're doing it tandem, so the guy just says, okay, fuck it, let's go, and he jumps out of the plane, and like for the first few seconds, you're terrified, you're trying not to pee and poop yourself, right?
Yep, pretty much.
Now, you're probably actually feeling a little anxiety right now thinking about it. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm getting anxious thinking about it, and I've never even done it. So, and then, you know, the first few seconds, you're like, oh, shit, and then it gets, like, super peaceful and serene. Like I said, I've never done this. I'm going on the accounts of friends who have done it, and that's what they say, and it got super peaceful, and you're fine. Then you get on the ground, and you're, like, shaky, and you're all jacked up. And let me ask you as well, have you ever been in a fight or almost in a fight?
Probably, yes, definitely.
How about a car wreck, like a car accident or almost a car accident?
Nah, I haven't
No.
experienced that, no.
So if you think about that response, like jumping out of a plane for you should be eustress, should be good stress, because you're choosing to do this. You're kind of you know, clicking that off of your bucket list type of thing. If you've ever almost gotten in a fight, somebody's punched you in the face, or you've punched somebody else, or you're about to, or whatever, or you've been in a car accident or almost, or you've been like super scared, you'll notice that it's all the same response. So even if it's eustress, distress, your body, it's the same nervous system response, and it's the same hormonal response. It's the same, you're jacked up on adrenaline and noradrenaline and cortisol. Your nervous system, you're twitchy, you're shaky, you're sweaty, you're nauseous. It's all the same thing. So when we look at allostatic load, we have to think about all of the stress your client's going through. And this is really important because when people come in to train with us, what we're thinking is we're just going to beast this dude out. Like I'm going to beast this guy, and I'm going to try to make him throw up. And, you know, I'm going to train this guy harder than he's ever been trained because that's what I do. But if we don't take into account all the other stressors in that person's life, what if that person was on the verge of getting a divorce because they work too much? What if their 8-year-old kid is smoking crack? What if they just, you know, lost their job? Or what if they had to fire somebody? Or what if they're about to there's all this stuff that's going on that in the scheme of program design we don't normally think about. We just write a program and then we just kind of lay and pray and hope it works. So you don't need to know everything about your client. You don't need to, you know, get super personal and find out every little piece about them unless they're offering that information. But you can get objective measurements on this stuff so that you understand where they are physiologically speaking, and then you can understand, okay, am I giving this person the right amount of work? Am I going too hard? Do I need to move horizontally and give them a different type of stressor, that type of thing? And the dose makes the poison. So when I look at the metrics and I create a blueprint of how their stress is going and if they're adapting or maladapting, then I can look at the program and say, okay, maybe 40 minutes of intense exercise isn't for this guy. Maybe we need 20 minutes of intense exercise and 40 minutes of kind of easier exercise for a while. And when the metrics start looking better, now I can start turning up the volume on the training instead of just throwing somebody into the fire and hoping they don't get burnt, right? So when we look at homeostasis, so we've got this homeostatic line here, And how do we adapt from training, right? We have a training stimulus. You go into a fatigue state, and then you take time off, you recover, and then you supercompensate, and now homeostasis has been raised to a new level. But that stimulus is not just training, it's also sleep or lack of sleep. It's also the nutrition. How are they managing their stress? How is their lifestyle? So we need to really get a good picture of that physiologic state before we can properly give someone a training program, a conditioning program, a nutritional program. Okay? So what are some of the various stressors that people are going to deal with? Like, we're in Australia. People get on the piss, right? So alcohol is a big one. Why do your clients drink so much alcohol?
Because they're stressed.
Stress, yeah.
They're stressed. They're self-medicating. If I have a guy that's drinking a couple of glasses of wine a night, not that big of a deal, but a lot of our clients, that a standard glass of wine is 125 mil. I don't even know why they sell those. Most people will go straight to the 250 mil, and they'll have 3 glasses. Oh, I had 3 glasses of wine. No, you actually had 6 glasses of wine. And then on the weekend, they're probably doing even more than that. So that's something we need to take into account, because not just from the inflammatory effects of the alcohol, but also in the toxicity effect, but that's also a source of calories that a lot of your clients don't think it matters. Because let's say I put somebody on a low carbohydrate diet and they go, oh, I looked up red wine. There's not very many carbs in it. And because maybe I didn't educate my client enough on the fact that alcohol is 7 calories per gram, and that adds up. If my client drinks 3 250 ml glasses of wine, even if he does that a couple of days a week, that's over 500 to 600 calories. And a lot of your clients won't even track that because they don't think it matters. And then you're looking at their food log and you're going, I don't understand why you're not losing weight. Like, you should be. And then you're following them on Instagram, and then you see, oh, I see you went out Saturday night. I see you went out Friday night. I see, how much wine did you have? Oh, I only had a couple of glasses. Well, it looks like you had probably 500 mils a night. That's an extra 600-700 calories we're not accounting for. That's probably why you're not losing weight. It's also probably why you're not sleeping well. That making sense. We look also training. Like, people will use training as medication. So you get guys who chronically overtrain. You get people who chronically undereat, overeat, you're binging and purging. They go through cycles of, how many of your clients are really good Monday through Friday, and then they go crazy over the weekend, right? It only takes one really gnarly cheat meal or refeed meal to blow your calories out of the water for the entire week. Okay, and so what we want to start talking to our clients about too is, don't think about things meal to meal. I want you to think about your calories over a week, over a month, over a quarter, over 6 months, over a year, because that's really what matters. Consistency over a long time. What do your clients typically do if they screw up breakfast?
Screw up the rest of the day.
Yeah, they go, fuck it. I'll start tomorrow, or I'll start Monday, and then they just keep going, right?
Generally happens on a Friday or Saturday as well.
That's it. Yeah, and what we have to realize, humans are opportunistic animals, right? If you think about this in an evolutionary perspective, we're really low. Like, we like to think of ourselves as apex predators. But if I drop you in the Serengeti in a loincloth, how long would you survive?
Not long.
5 minutes.
Yeah, not long. Like, you would probably get eaten by a lion or trampled by an elephant. Like, we don't have fangs. We don't have claws. We're really fucking slow. Like, the only thing that saves us is when we're in groups together, and the fact that we can make tools and things to protect ourselves. But if you don't have any of that stuff available, you're pretty screwed. So, we're not really that great of hunters unless we're using technology. We're mainly scavengers and opportunistic. So most humans are only designed to think about, like, the next few hours. So if they screw up a meal, they're thinking, screw it, I've messed up the whole day. They have to start thinking about a larger time domain. Like, we're thinking about this process over a long period of time. If you screw up a meal, that's cool. Just get back on the horse. Don't screw up 4 meals a day because you screwed up breakfast, right? So what else? Like, allergies and intolerances, trauma, relationships, toxic relationships, whether that's work. How many of your clients, it's not inexpensive to train with a personal trainer. You have to have some disposable income, and to have disposable income means you're probably working a lot, or you're with someone who works a lot, or you both work a lot, right? And think it's Biggie Smalls said it, mo money, mo problems. So most people that are coming in to train with you guys probably don't feel very good about themselves and probably don't feel very good about their life and things like that because they're probably overworked and underslept and overstressed and all that. So this is all things I want you guys to start thinking about when you're looking at training programs that you're putting people on, because all of this stuff can add up and make the program less effective or not effective at all, especially in regards to things like nutritional programming, because if someone's going to self-medicate, they're typically going to self-medicate with food or booze or drugs. At least drugs don't have any calories, so that's kind of a bonus.
Suppressant.
Right, so the guys in Melbourne will understand this. Right? That's like the drug capital of Australia, isn't it? So now, if we look at how does adversity affect your physiology? So we have what's called conserved transcriptional response to adversity, meaning that the brain will control your epigenetics. So a lot of people will look at their genetics. They'll get a genetic report and they'll say, oh, well, my genes are set up to be fat or my genes are set up to be whatever. And they need to understand that the way you're built, your DNA, doesn't dictate how your body runs. What dictates how your body runs is how your environment plays on your DNA. And so adversity is a really big one. Your brain has two default modes. All your brain really cares about is, do I feel safe and secure or do I feel threatened? And so when we look on the left of this slide, we see historical physical threats. Like, okay, I don't know when the last time you were attacked by a rabid chimpanzee. I don't know. That might be something that happens to you. Maybe you live by a zoo. I don't know. But most of this stuff is not going to happen to people these days, right? In a historical physical scenario, your fight or flight, freeze or facade mode, your sympathetic state is really there for survival, right? Now, that being said, the adaptations you get in an acute stress manner where you have an increase in pro-inflammatory genes, pro-inflammatory immune response genes, those are there to basically keep you alive if, like, say you got bitten by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever. So you have a survival state. Your body goes, oh shit, you ramp up immune system function, your inflammation goes up to protect yourself, also to mobilize free fatty acids and to mobilize glucose because you need energy available to be able to get away from these things. Once you get away, now your parasympathetic state goes up, sympathetic state goes down, be able to then recover from that, and then all of those pro-inflammatory immune response genes then get re-regulated. But we don't really have these historical physical threats anymore. Now we have more contemporary social threats. So we have things like, everyone has to be a millionaire now. You have to have the best car in the house, and people are working themselves. Most of your clients probably work 50, 60 hours a week, if not more. They're dealing with their clients, they're dealing with their employees, they're dealing with their boss, and they're dealing with all this. And so things that are supposed to be raised acutely in an adverse situation are now being raised chronically. So it would be like, let's say that saber-toothed tiger jumped out at you and you got away, but when you got home, he was sitting in your kitchen, and now he's watching you make a sandwich, and he's licking his lips, and you can't tell if the guy wants to eat the sandwich or if he's going to eat you. You'd be pretty stressed out, wouldn't you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So that's the problem, is our bodies aren't to tiger or that monkey on our back all the time. So that's where the real issues come up. So what we don't want to do is create an adverse response by giving somebody the wrong type of training protocols when they're already pretty stressed out. And we also need to look at in the scheme of program design as I really need to be programming my client lifestyle homework to do at home, right? Because if they don't understand the value of recovery, then A, their results aren't should be, or B, they're going to get great results, but then they're going to get a metabolic blowback where they blow back up. Okay, so we look here with like a standard fat loss protocol where people are over dieting, they're rushing things, they're under recovering, they're not eating as much, so they're going to have nutrient deficiencies. This is going to have an impact on the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is going to jack up sympathetic response through the nervous system. you're going to get an increase of adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. And when those chemicals attach to the receptors, now you have expression of antiviral immune response genes. Okay, so inflammation is a really big term in our industry right now, and so people are always asking me like what pills I can give somebody to reduce inflammation. Well, you can give all the pills you want, but if you don't get their brain right and if you don't get their autonomic tone rebalanced, the pills are just, it's basically putting a Band-Aid over a bullet hole. It's not going to work. What we have to do is we have to convince people's brains that they're in a safe and secure place when they're outside of the gym and they're at home, right? So your hypothalamus is going to control all of this. If your brain has a central nervous system threat perception, it's going to increase nervous system activation through the sympathetic branch. We're going to increase things like adrenaline, cortisol, and noradrenaline, and that's going to cause gene expression that then creates an inflammatory response. Now, when you train, that's a normal thing. Like if I go and I'm saying, okay, I want to put on a few kilos, I'm going to do a standard hypertrophy protocol. I want some inflammation because that inflammation is what's going to drive muscular growth and also strength growth. The problem is if I go into the gym and I purposely put myself in an inflammatory state using training, and then I go home and I'm still in that inflammatory state because I'm not doing anything to relax, then my result, how's your body going to adapt? It's going to maladapt at that point because it can't recover from the training it's doing. Okay, so your two branches. There is a case to be said about the enteric nervous system too, which is your basically your brain-gut axis. But we're not going to talk about that just yet. We'll talk about gut issues in a later module. But if you look here on the left in your sympathetic system, how many of your clients have digestion issues?
Probably a few, to be honest.
I would probably say almost all of them, right?
Yes.
Even when I'm in class and I'm talking to coaches, I'm like, how many of you guys have digestive issues? Almost everybody raises their hands, right? Whether that's bloating, food intolerances, gas, burping, burning in their stomach. The higher your sympathetic state, if you're not going that parasympathetic state, that's going to jack up your digestion. And for the majority of the industry, they ask me, give me a really good gut protocol. Well, I can give you gut protocols, but if you don't get your body calmed back down, it's not gonna matter because you're basically trying to push an elephant up a hill at that point. So we look at what about sleep? How many of your clients work?
Most of them.
Most of them, and then they come to you and they go, I can't sleep because I'm waking up like 5 times asleep. Well, if you look down here, when you're sympathetic, it relaxes your bladder. So what's going to happen if your bladder relaxes? You're going to have to pee a lot. This is also a big case too, especially in the summer months where your client's training and they're sweating a lot, they're drinking a lot of water, but they're still dehydrated because they're peeing all their water out. And they simply can't retain the water, which if you crank the water up and they're peeing it all out, you're really doing it for nothing. What about glucose released by the liver? You get clients that come in and maybe they've been told by their doctor that they're pre-diabetic. Okay, that is a sympathetic state causing glucose released by the liver. Okay, this is all stuff we can fix if we give the right training, if we convince them that it's ownership of their recovery. Okay, what about in the middle here where we see increased heart rate, right? So that's something that we can measure. It's very easy to measure heart rate. We can do this with a heart rate strap. We can also use our phones. That's the great thing about modern technology is I can use my iPhone or I can use my Android, and there are apps that I can use to measure my heart rate, and they're fairly. The apps that we like to use is an app called Argus. It's ARGUS, and it has a heart rate feature that uses the camera on the back of your phone, and it's fairly decently accurate. And what's nice about Argus is that I can friend my clients on it, and if they're taking the heart rate, I can look at their portal and see where their heart rate is, and I can see if they're actually taking that or not, right? So that's a good thing to have people start to take, and then letting them know if your heart rate starts to increase, we know that you're now basically your recovery is starting to crumble, and we have to focus our training on some different aspect to try to get that back down. And then when we start looking at the metrics, we can utilize heart rate, heart variability, and blood pressure. We can use that once they're healthy. We can use that to tell when somebody needs a deload, like when they need to stop training as hard and kind of take a little bit of a break in their training and not go as hard. you look at the bottom here with the peripheral vasoconstriction, that's your blood pressure. So as you get more sympathetic, your blood pressure is going to go up. Okay? Right. So with the digestion, there's a few different things going on. So there is a hormonal aspect here. So when your HPA starts to go up, your body's going to release adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. That will have an effect on your intestines to create more permeability in the intestines. So if you're talking to your clients about digestion issues and they want to fix that, that all starts in the brain. And it's very easy to fix if you convince them to do the recovery things. But irrespective of the hormones, you also have a nervous system response, okay, sympathetic output through that sympathetic branch that also creates permeability in the intestines and also increases allergies with histamine activation in mast cells, okay? When people get permeable intestines, what's happening is they're creating more doorways of getting things from the intestines into circulation. When that happens, the immune system looks at that and thinks that that's a foreign invader. So let's look at like carbohydrates. What type of carbohydrate should be going into circulation? So we have monosaccharides, disaccharides, polysaccharides. Which one of those are supposed to be go into circulation and get into your bloodstream? You have a 1 in 3 chance of getting it right. Bueller, anyone?
I'm just going to go say monosaccharides. I don't know.
There you go. Winner, chicken dinner. Exactly, monosaccharides, right? So
yeah,
how do we take a complex carbohydrate? You eat a sweet potato. A sweet potato is going to be high in polysaccharides, high in complex carbohydrates. How do we turn those sugars into monosaccharides? Okay, number one, we have to chew our food. Number two, we have to have enough saliva because 5% of your sugar breakdown happens in the mouth. If we go back to this, you see here, inhibits salivation. So if I'm stressed out, and I don't have enough saliva, or that's inhibited, have I already screwed up carbohydrate metabolism?
Yes.
Yes, 100%. Think about this too. Most of your clients don't chew their food like an adult. Most trainers don't chew their food like an adult. You know, you guys, and I'm one of the worst offenders of this, where you have poor time management, you get your meal, and you unhinge your jaw, and you basically swallow your food whole like a snake. Right? So the more stressed out you are, the more likely you are to do that. Okay, and what we should be talking to our clients about with digestion is you're chewing your food until it's a semi-liquid state, because we really want to get that breakdown, and we also want the brain to understand what's coming into the body. Okay, now we've also got inhibited peristalsis and secretion, so secretion of gastric juices like HCl and pepsin, and also things like pancreatic enzymes. Those pancreatic enzymes and that amylase is what breaks down the carbohydrate. So if I'm eating a lot of carbohydrates and they're not breaking down all the way, not breaking down the monosaccharides, and that gets into circulation, then the body's going to see that as a foreign invader, as an antigen, and it's going to mount an immune response. And with an immune response works by increasing inflammation. That inflammation then, through a feedback loop, affects the brain and then increases your stress response. And then over time, you will end up getting some type of food intolerance. Right? So instead of focusing on the end effect of the food intolerance, what we should be focused on is the brain and the stress response. If I can get someone to lower, like start working on stress management and lowering that stress response, I can, over the course of a few weeks, remove a lot of their food intolerances without the need of expensive gut tests like IgG tests or leak panels or whatever. We can use an elimination diet and utilize lifestyle techniques to get their guts back in order. Okay, so we look in the middle here with stress. So you've got psychological stress, traumatic. Some people are affected by electromagnetic things like EMF, infectious, allergic, despotic, xenobiotic, so environmental toxins and things like that. you will get a stimulus of the hypothalamus to mount a stress response, meaning you're going to be secreting cortisol, adrenaline, noradrenaline. The more stressed out the adrenals are, the more stressed out your brain is and thinking that's in that fear state, it then has an effect on your thyroid by inhibiting thyroid output and thyroid conversion into active thyroid. Okay, if you have an inhibition of thyroid becoming active, what's that going to do to your metabolism?
Slow it down.
Going to slow it down. Then you get people that they're eating, 1,000 calories a week or a day, and they can't lose weight. And so, like, what do we do at this point? Like, you can't just keep taking food away and adding more exercise. That's what a lot of people do. But if we're doing that, you're going to get to a point where they simply can't eat any less and they simply can't train anymore. And all that's doing is driving this stuff faster and faster and further into the hole, right? So if we look here on the left, what is this? SNS, that's sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so if I can get the client calmed down, if stress is what drives all of this, now if I calm that stress down, is it safe to assume that a lot of this stuff is going to get back online?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can use specific supplementation for this. Like if we look here on the left, we can use adaptogens, right? We can use adaptogens. There's nothing wrong with that. But if we're not working on the lifestyle stuff, the adaptogens don't work as well as they should. Okay, and we're not going to get into adaptogens. I've got more material for you here, but we're going to go through all of these and when you would and wouldn't want to use these. Okay, right now we're not going to go into it because we've got a lot more slides to look at. Are you guys doing okay so far? Is this too fast, too slow? Just right?
Not so good. It's just right. Yep.
Yeah,
Right,
just
perfect.
right.
Good. Remember, I'm recording it too, so we'll have it uploaded today or tomorrow. You guys will be able to watch it again if you want to.
Cool.
Okay, so now that we understand that stress is really the thing we need to worry about, right? That's what we have to start focusing on with our really stressed out executives, business owners, and man, life these days is just stressful. Like everyone's having to deal with it, but people aren't managing it like they should. So we look at getting client buy-in. We want to show them some objective data, okay? Now, in my experience, men typically work better with objective data and women tend to work better with subjective data. So what's the difference? Subjective data is how I feel, and objective data it's a data that you can add a number to, and it's a measurable metric. Now, both of these things are important, right? You can't have someone telling you they feel this way and just discard it and tell them they're full of shit. You have to listen to them and say, okay, I understand you feel this way. Now let's take some objective data and let's see what the numbers say. And then we can utilize that over time to see if they're getting better. So some of the tracking that we can do, look, we can look at blood pressure. This is very easy. I think a lot of you guys, after I came out and spoke to you, a lot of you went out and got blood pressure cuffs. Anyone on the call that actually went out and got a blood pressure cuff? So yeah or no?
No, not yet. I've been planning to though.
Okay, planning to. Great. Look, you can go to the chemist. You can get an Omron. They're not expensive. This is the Omron Evolve BP 7000. You can order one on eBay. That's the one that I recommend because you look at this picture here and you've got the machine and the tube and the arm strap and all that. It's kind of a pain in the ass. It's not very portable. With the Omron that I use, it's just the cuff, fits on your arm. You can get a metric within, 20 seconds, 15 seconds. Yep. So it's great. I recommend our client. What's that?
What the wrist ones, are they as accurate as the upper arm ones?
I was never big into the wrist ones. I didn't find them to be as accurate, but there was actually a study that just came out. Omron came out with 2 watches, and they found them to be fairly accurate. Now, I haven't read through the study, so I don't know how good it is. I just looked at a research review on it, and it tends to be okay. I personally would just stick to the arm cuff because there's, they've been around forever, and they're very easy to use, and I know it's accurate. So that's what I would look at, right? So. So what I would do is at all your facilities at least have a couple of the blood pressure cuffs, and start getting your clients to take their own blood pressure. Have them come in like 5 to 7 minutes before session, have them sit down, go at rest, have the arm cuff on, hit the button, and within 10 to 15 seconds they have a reading. If they have high blood pressure, maybe they're being seen by a doctor, I would encourage them to get their own and start taking it in the morning. Now, most of the people that we train at Muscle Nerds, they're coaches just like you guys, so they want to learn the systems and all that. So they tend to get all the equipment, and they tend to do all the data acquisition. But a lot of gym pop people aren't going to do that. So it's good to have procedures in place where you can start getting some metrics at the gym when people are there, so that you can control what's happening while they're with you. And like, this isn't something they need to do like every day, but if you could get them to do their blood pressure maybe once every few weeks, then that's going to be really good indication of, are they tracking in the right direction? And if they're not, now we need to try to figure out why they're not. With heart rate and heart rate variability, they can use their phone for this. There's an app called HRV for training that works really well, and it works with the camera on the back of the phone. Unfortunately, I don't have any ranges of where they need to be. My ranges are based on an app called Elite HRV, and it's based on using a Polar H10 heart rate strap. So if your client will use that, I think that's perfect. Again, I would probably have a couple of heart rate straps at the gym for my clients. Say, okay, come in, sit down for 5 minutes, have the blood pressure cuff on, have the chest strap on, and then let's take your metrics really quick, and let's do this like once every 3 or 4 weeks just to see how you're being affected by the training. Blood glucose can be another valuable one. Unfortunately, some people are scared of needles, so that's not going to be a good one for everyone. But if you can get that, that can be a good metric, especially if somebody's pre-diabetic and their doctor has suggested that, right? Now, some of the subjective things we can ask our clients, let me know on a scale of 1 to 5, how's your energy levels? Okay, 1 being shit energy, 5 being I've got amazing energy. We can do the same thing on stress. With the training, are they getting stronger? Yes or no? Are they recovering from the workouts? Yes or no? How's their mood? Are you having mood swings? In a lot of cases, it's probably best to ask their partner about that. How's your sleep? Are you waking up a lot to pee at night? If you are, that's not good. Do you feel well rested in the morning? Do you need an alarm clock to wake up? If you need an alarm clock to wake up, then that's not good, right? What about your digestion? Do you have any bloating or burping or farting or any of this? And I'll send you guys a couple of digestion questionnaires that you can use. I like to use 2 different ones because it asks questions in slightly 2 different ways. And by doing that, you'll see things that pop up on one that don't pop up on the other. And a lot of these questionnaires is really to just bring bring their attention to issues they may be having. Like, you might not even use the questionnaires. It might be something where they fill out the questionnaire and you say, oh, I see you're having some digestive issues. Yeah, okay, cool. Let me explain how stress creates digestive issues, right? But a lot of it, like I said, it's all education. It's the more educated we can make our clients, the easier it is to train them, because then they auto-regulate and they take control of their own health. But if we're not educating them, then they're not going to do anything, because they're relying on you guys to tell them all of this stuff. Right? And now I've got some research that you can show people. If you look at this study, this came out in 2002. It takes roughly 15 to 17 years for peer-reviewed research, published research, to actually start being used. And I don't know why that is, but that seems to be the case. And last year, so 2018, the American Medical Association lowered all of the ranges for hypertension. So pre-2018, 130/90 was considered pre-hypertense, 140 was stage 1, 150 was stage 2. But now that it's been, since this was out in 2002, now is about the right time for this research to start being used by people. And they said, you know what, the ranges aren't good enough. We need to lower them. So it's not big pharma. There's no conspiracy. It's just that the research is now becoming mainstream. And what they found is 68% of all mortality attributed to high blood pressure occurred with a systolic between 120 and 140. Okay. Now, I did a seminar yesterday for a place in Singapore, and there were 35 coaches there. Almost every single one of them was above 135. And I think it's a big shock to a lot of trainers where, you know, we're supposed to be the leaders in health and fitness. When you actually start taking your metrics, you realize, holy shit, like I'm not as healthy as I thought, right? And I've done courses where there were people in the room with 210 over 110 blood pressure, which is just, to me, like insane. But if we don't measure this stuff, then we have no idea. You can only manage what you measure. That's why I'm so high on getting these metrics done with your clients and also with yourself. And then you see how the training affects you, whether it pushes you in the right direction or the wrong direction. And Dr. Alex Vasquez, if you don't know who that is, I highly recommend you start looking at his stuff as well. His gold standard was 115 over 75. So you should be somewhere around that. My range is typically about 100 to 120 on the systolic, and we go with like 60 to about 80 on the diastolic. If you're in that range, I'm pretty happy. If you're above that range, you're probably going to need more conditioning. If you're below that range, then you probably need a lot more weightlifting. And what you'll find is most men are going to be hypertense. Most, at least successful men, are going to be hypertense, or guys who are training really hard with weights. Most women will be hypotense. So how do most women start their fat loss routines before they come to see you guys?
Too much cardio and not enough food?
Absolutely. That is 100% the right thing to do. So most women they'll start running because that's the easiest thing for them to do, and then they'll starve themselves, right? Or they'll go through periods of starving themselves and then binging. So what we tend to see is a lot of conditioning will lower your blood pressure. A lot of weight training will raise your blood pressure. So when you look at, I think the biggest demographic that you'll see with very low blood pressure, like people who are coming in with like under 90 over 60, it's going to be a lot of like middle-aged moms, right, that have been through like a lot of stress over like 10 years, 15 years, whatever, with kids and the partner and all that stuff, and putting everybody before them because that's a typical mom thing to do. And then also trying to self-medicate with boot camps or Zumba or running and then not eating enough. So majority of your women that are coming to you, when you get the metrics, you're going to see they're a little bit low blood pressure. They're probably going to need a lot more weight training and also like HIIT training and harder intervals. And most guys will probably do a lot better starting with a little bit more aerobic conditioning and a little bit less weight training, or moving their weight training to submaximal higher rep work, right? But Alex Vasquez has been talking about this 115 over 75 for 10 years, 15 years, right? And so here's another one that came out in 2007. So no one's really even talking about this yet. Starting at 115 over 75, cardiovascular risk doubles with each increment of 20 over the systolic and 10 over diastolic, right? So if you're sitting at 135 over 75, you've already doubled your cardiovascular risk. If you find somebody that's let's say they're 135 over 85, then that's basically a double-double, right? So this can potentially be like really serious shit that people aren't really aware of. And then doctors don't really know. It's like this study here that 70% of mortality attributed to high blood pressure is between 120 to 140. If you go to the doctor and you're sitting at 130, he's not going to think that's a really big deal. Like he's not going to medicate you for that. He's going to tell you to, watch the sodium and start walking more, or he'll tell you to exercise. Well, if you're a 45-year-old guy and you like to lift weights and the doctor says you need to exercise more, what are you most likely to do? You're probably going to go lift more weights and lift heavier and harder. And in fact, that could potentially make things a lot worse. Okay. There's also a big return on investment with this. You only need to reduce systolic blood pressure -5 to get a 7% reduction in cardiovascular mortality. And that's huge. Right? It doesn't take a large drop to see a big increase in your health. Also, studies show that sustained blood pressure above 140 over 90 leads to left ventricular concentric hypertrophy. So that's the same adaptation that we observe with people who only lift heavy weights and they don't do any conditioning work. So you see a lot of strength athletes, especially in Australia. I talk to a lot of these guys. A lot of the guys that are going to be at the Arnold's lifting next weekend. And I get them to start monitoring their blood pressure, and they're all 140, 150, 160 or higher, and they've been told that that's totally normal, but that's not normal, right? There's a lot of people, a lot of powerlifters I've worked with in Australia that have picture perfect blood pressure, and they're still high level world-class powerlifters. So all it takes is convincing them to do a little bit more conditioning to kind of counteract some of that sustained blood pressure that they're getting from weightlifting. If you look at somebody who doesn't lift, let's say Joe Dingleberry comes in and he's been sedentary and probably overeating a little bit, and he's also really stressed out from work. He'll come in and he could have over 140 over. He could have 140 over 90 or higher just because of stress. That elevated stress can also lead to those adaptations you see. So if he's stressed out like that, and he's also lifting a lot of weights, especially really heavy weights, he comes in and does 5x5 or 3-to-1 wave loading, most likely he's going to make his blood pressure a lot worse, and he's going to drive himself to having some type of metabolic or cardiovascular issue over the next however many years. And then, it may not be, he may not stroke out while he's training with you, but that might be the catalyst that makes him have an issue 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's look, guys, it's just reframing the narrative, guys, like making you guys think about possibly what things where are the missing links that my clients might need to work on. Once I start measuring this stuff and saying, oh, wow, like I might be in a worse spot than I thought, and my clients might also be in a worse spot than I thought. I need to talk to them about this, maybe even make a standard RBT manual that explains all of this stuff so that your clients will start measuring this stuff and go, wow, okay, now I understand why Luke wants me to do a little bit of extra aerobic work at home. I really need to take this seriously, right? Now, what about waking heart rate? Now, this was a study on resting heart rate. I like to do waking heart rate, waking HRV, and also waking blood pressure because hopefully you haven't had any stressor when you wake up. The minute you get out of bed, you stub your toe on something or you have some coffee or whatever you do in the morning, you can start modifying some of the metrics. So in order to keep the standard, we look at client wakes up, blood pressure cuff on, heart rate strap on, they sit up in bed, and then they take their metrics. Within 3 minutes, they've got all 3 metrics, and they can start tracking that. If they don't want to use a blood pressure cuff, cool. If they don't want to do HRV, cool. They just do, instant heart rate on Argus or some other app, and they can at least get that metric because that's easy to do. It only takes, 30 seconds or so. But what they found was a high resting heart rate was associated with increased cardiovascular morbidity and mortality in the general population, independent of conventional risk factors. So conventional risk factors, you could go to the doctor and your blood chemistry panel might look really good, and your doctor's like, you're fine, but you could have 85 beats per minute resting heart rate. And that has been associated with having some type of cardiovascular issue. When I first started Muscle Nerds and I left Poliquin Group, I had a lot of old Poliquin coaches coming to me because they looked amazing, but they couldn't sleep, they couldn't take a solid crap, their hair was falling out, their testosterone was low, their libido was low, and all of them were doing really heavy weight training and a lot of lactate sprinting and things like that. Almost every single guy had 85 to 100 resting heart rate. So they're basically living in this sympathetic state all the time, and then they're compounding that with doing training that's not correct for their physiology right now. And they were all scared of doing aerobics or scared of doing metabolic work because they were told it's going to make you fat and weak and all that, and that's simply not the case. Are dead set on being as big and strong as possible, and you're not doing any type of conditioning or watching your sodium potassium balance, you're not controlling your heart rate, not controlling your blood pressure, I can assure you that your performance is going to go down because getting injured or dying is really, really not good for performance. Like dying is probably the worst thing for performance. Having a stroke is a really bad thing for performance, right? So if we want to have high performance, if we want to have good longevity, we need to make sure that what our clients are doing is balanced and pushing their physiology in the right direction. So what they found was an increase from under 70 beats per minute to over 85 was associated with a 90% increase in mortality. Now, the results were inconclusive of whether lowering resting heart rate might be beneficial, they just don't know for certain. But as more and more data comes out, it's being more and more clear that having a higher heart rate is not good, right? And it's fairly easy to get that down within 4 to 6 weeks of restructuring how you're training and then restructuring that lifestyle and stress management. Okay, and now with the waking heart rate and HRV, if you don't know what HRV is, okay, you see here on the slide a series of beats, and HRV records the time distance between the R and R interval of your heart rate. When you have high variability, then the time between those, each subsequent beat, is different. It's very variable. When you get stressed out, your heart starts to beat like a metronome. It gets very efficient because it's getting ready for some type of survival issue. So we want the HRV to be, if you look at the range, like on Elite HRV, which is what I've standardized our stuff to, based on Joel Jamieson's work, right? If you want to look into more of that, Joel Jamieson is the guy to look at. He's the one that really made HRV like really popular. Elite HRV has a range from 50 to 100. Now, if you look at 80, that's a really good goal for general population. However, it's just a number. It doesn't define people, or you shouldn't identify with these numbers. We've got a good spread of plus or minus about 10. You want to make sure you're giving people ranges to kind of jump into, because if you give them a solid number and they're not nailing that number, that can get people obsessive about it, and that can create like a stress response in people. And I see this all the time. So the goal is to get the HRV in a better range. It's not to nail a specific number. A lot of the people that come to us, they'll have high waking heart rate and they'll have an HRV in the high 40s or the low 50s. We put them on a specific conditioning routine. We look at their sodium-potassium ratio. We give them more fruits and veggies. We tell them to stop chronically undereating. It's very easy to drive a 52, 53 HRV up into the mid-high 60s, and I think that's incredible. The goal is to push it up a little bit. It's not to worry about getting to 80, because some people will never get to 80. There's a few reasons why training might not raise that, and a couple of them are majority of people that when I look at their labs, the majority of people are walking around with a subclinical chronic gut infection they don't even know they have. That could be an issue. So we might need to send them to a doctor to get on antibiotics, or do natural antibiotics or whatever. The second reason I've found is people that have early childhood traumas, or they've had some traumatic things going on in their life that they're not addressing, and they might possibly need to be referred out to a counselor or somebody who can help work them through that. So if you give them some protocols and that HRV is not moving, but their blood pressure is getting better and their heart rate's getting better, you might want to consider then referring them out for labs, and especially if they have gut issues, if they have diarrhea, constipation, bloating, food intolerances, then you might want to refer them out to somebody who can, who's licensed to get the bloods. They can also interpret that to see if they have some type of infection. If they don't have gut issues and you're hearing some red flags that they might have some issues coming from childhood or adolescence, or even trauma that's lately in their life, you might want to talk about having them going to refer out to see some type of counselor or something. And a question I'm often asked is, how do you talk to the client about maybe going out and getting counseling or getting therapy? And so what I basically do is, when I'm watching these metrics, if the HRV is not coming up and the blood pressure is getting better and the heart rate's getting better, then I basically tell them what I just told you guys. In my experience, there's two reasons why the HRV wouldn't go up. A, could be a chronic gut infection. B, could be unresolved baggage and trauma. Do you feel like either of those might be the case with you? And then you let them kind of chew on that and go, yeah, you know what, I had some stuff happen when I was a kid or whatever. What do you think I should do? And then the appropriate answer is, oh, let me refer you out to somebody to talk to you about that, because that could be an issue you might need to get fixed. You guys got that?
Yep.
Yeah. What you don't want to do is, you don't want to look at them and go, I think you're cray-cray. I think you're cray-cray. Let's talk about that, right? Because then you get a bit out of scope of practice. Okay. Any questions?
That's all pretty smooth
Not
so
at the
far.
moment. Yeah.
Shit, has it been an hour and a half so far? Jesus.
Yeah, that went quick.
Oh my God. You guys want to keep going a little bit, or do you need to go?
You can keep going.
How much longer do you reckon?
I don't know. So you guys don't want to listen to me anymore.
No, I'm happy to go. I'm happy to keep going.
You want to go? Let's go another 30 minutes. How about that?
Yeah, cool.
Sounds good.
Because we'll get on to this relative energy deficiency syndrome. Now, this previously was called relative energy deficiency in sport, and what they found was it mainly was affecting young women athletes, and it's attributed to not matching calories to performance, right? So you get people who maybe they're a soccer player, maybe they play rugby, AFL, whatever, and you look at like especially college women, they have this standard of how they think they should look physically, and they think that the way to get there is to diet. When you look at performance, dieting is not a very good thing, and so we get something that it originally started as the female athlete triad, where they're chronically underfeeding and chronically exercising. Then they lose their period, and then they get osteoporotic. Now they're seeing this in not only women but men, where men now have low testosterone, no libido. You get guys that are getting subclinical hypothyroidism, same as women, guys who are becoming osteoporotic. They did a study, James Laval did a study of 16 basketball players at University of Florida. And in a case where you normally don't see men who are osteoporotic or men who have anemia, 12 out of 16 people on their basketball team had anemia. And what they were doing was, they don't eat very, very good food. They train a lot, and then they're chronically undereating. So this is a big thing that you guys are going to hear about in the next 5 to 10 years. So I'm going to get you kind of ahead of the curve on this stuff, right? And this was an Olympic Committee consensus statement that started in 2002, I think was the first one. Then they redid it in 2007. They just redid it again last year in 2018. And what they found was the underlying problem is that people are not eating enough to support their health and performance. And they've got minimum thresholds. I'm going to show you a case study at the end of this. And when I show you this, you're going to think this is ridiculous what is happening to people, especially in the transformation side of our industry, right? So you guys have probably all seen this before. What is your total daily energy expenditure? You've got your BMR, which is what's keeping you alive and keeping you in optimal health. You've got non-exercise activity thermogenesis, thermic effect of food, and exercise activity thermogenesis. So in a sedentary person, the BMR can be 60, 70%. The more you train, the less BMR is a percentage of this, right? When you look at thermic effect of food, the minute you pull food out of someone's diet, you've just lost thermic effect of food. Like, it's lowered. When that happens, you're going to have some other things happening, like non-exercise activity thermogenesis is going to drop as well. And this is all the stuff you do that you're doing it subconsciously. So like fidgeting, blinking, thinking, talking. And if you've ever done a physique show, or you've ever gotten like dick skin lean, you'll know what I'm talking about, where the last 3 or 4 weeks you're so tired you can't be bothered to do anything really. And then you notice like you can't think and you're talking really slow. And that's a pretty normal thing when you're doing a physique show, but it shouldn't be a normal thing when we're talking about our general population clients, right? So, how do we negate some of this? You see a lot of people talking about, doing a lot of walking to negate NEAT. That's partially true, partially untrue, but I've seen, you're getting people now talking, they're trying to make walking sexy. Like, okay, we're going to periodize your walking, periodize your NEAT. It's the fucking most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, right? And when you look into the research for NEAT and walking, they have pretty much figured out like what is the minimum threshold you need to walk daily to keep your NEAT high enough, and to utilize walking and NEAT to have a response on the hypothalamus to control satiety, cravings, and leptin and ghrelin and all that. And that number is not as high as you would think. Like, if you think about traditionally, how many steps would a doctor probably tell you to try to take a day?
Normally about 10,000.
10,000. Do you know where that number comes from?
Yeah, but I think I'm not sure, but I think last time you were in Perth, you said it was around 7,500. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the actual number that we found in research so far is 7,116. That's that minimum threshold, right? The number 10,000, that came from a marketing ploy when the Japanese made pedometers. So they made pedometers and they said, oh, well, now we need to figure out how to sell them. How do we sell them? And they said, well, we need to give people a walking goal. Okay, well, what's a good round number? 10,000 seems to be about right. And so there was initially no real research on that. Now, I will say this. I've seen a lot of success getting people to walk more, but our clients are time poor. And if we give them a ridiculous step goal, they're going to get anxiety about hitting that step goal. If I'm giving people 14,000 steps, 20,000 steps, like where's the cutoff for lunacy when we're giving people a fucking walking goal? And if you think about, it takes 10 minutes to walk about 1,000 steps. So if I tell somebody to walk 14,000 steps a day, I'm asking someone to meal prep, try to get 8 hours of sleep a night, train an hour, walk 2.5 hours a day, and then try to have time with their family and do other things, right? So for me, if they have time to walk 14,000 steps a day, they probably have time to get a hobby and maybe do some extra conditioning that's going to give you a better return on investment. So, I mean, why would I have somebody go walk 14,000 steps a day when I could just get them to do a little bit extra conditioning or do another weight training workout or something like that, or go to a yoga class or do something else that's a little bit more beneficial? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Your goal for NEAT is like, okay, let's monitor NEAT. Let's see where you are. So if my client is at a desk 12 hours a day and they're getting 3,000 steps, okay, Joe, I need you to go out and I really need you around 7,200 steps. So we really need to increase this to 7,200. It's not to tell them to crank it up to 14,000 steps. I mean, to me, that's a bit ridiculous. If they are getting, say, 7,000, 8,000 steps, the goal of NEAT is to monitor that and make sure NEAT doesn't drop. So if NEAT starts to drop under that 7,200 threshold, then okay, hey, I need you to do some dedicated walking, right? Easy. But our clients already have a hard enough time managing nutrition and training and sleep and life and all that stuff. The last thing I need to do is make some overly complex, incredibly time-dependent method to try to get them to get an energy output by increasing walking, right? So this when I show you I put some extra slides in here that I just came up with today, and you guys are going to see what I mean. Because people are what ends up happening is people are giving these ridiculous step goals where they're burning off an extra 600 or 700 calories a day, but they're not adding that back to their food. And then you'll see where the discrepancy in the caloric deficit is, and it's getting a bit ridiculous, So yeah, so look, we've got low energy intake, or not just energy intake, but high energy output. Okay, we have a massive energy deficit. That is going to have an effect on how is your metabolism going to adapt to that? You're going to lose uncoupled respiration. Your thyroid hormones are going to drop. Your anabolic hormones are going to drop, and then your catabolic hormones are going to go up. So at the end of the day, you're going to start having lowered energy expenditure. That is a totally natural adaptation to this. And then your hunger is going to go up. Totally natural adaptation to this. Okay. But now if I have lowered energy expenditure and I have increased hunger, how much willpower do our clients realistically have?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot. So now I've got a drop in my metabolic rate, and now I'm hangry all the time. Okay. And now what is that going to lead to? It's going to lead to binging, right? And if I'm going through periods of, starving myself and overtraining, and then I go through periods of binging, every time I binge, I'm at a greater capacity to put on body fat. And it's getting harder and harder for me to get it off unless I do something extreme. We look at uncoupled respiration. So we look at things like how the body produces heat. Okay. Now, if you've ever gotten really lean, you'll notice this. Like towards the end, you start getting freezing cold, right? Your basal metabolic rate starts to drop, and then your body will start preferentially parlaying all of its metabolic process into making more energy, because energy is conducive to survival, whereas heat production is not. So if you have somebody who's dieting and they're training and they're losing body fat, the minute they start realizing that their basal metabolic rate is dropping and their temperature is dropping, it's probably time for them to do a refeed or go back to maintenance. Okay. it is, again, it's a normal metabolic adaptation, but what we don't want to do is, okay, my client says, hey man, I'm freezing cold all the time. What do I need to do? We don't want to keep them dieting at that point, because all you're going to do is keep digging a deeper and deeper hole. What you might want to do is start using that as a metric to possibly determine how many weeks they can go in a deficit, and then how much time they need to spend back at maintenance. In my experience, it's about 3 weeks of dieting with 1 week of back to maintenance. That seems to be the sweet spot for most of the people that I've trained, right? And all of our physique athletes, you'll notice that like 3 to 4 weeks before they're supposed to be on stage, man, it'll be 25 degrees outside and they're freezing cold. They have to wear a hoodie. At that point, I've got all of my guys trained to understand they need to talk to me about that, because if they start seeing that their basal temperature is dropping, then we need to take them out of that dieting phase for a while to get that back. Okay, so now let's look at all of this, the pathologic issues that surround REDs, right? So we've got, look, gastrointestinal issues. We've already talked about that. The majority of your clients probably have some type of gastrointestinal issue. We look at the female athlete triad, where girls are losing their periods, or they have a really strange period. It's not consistent. They go through periods where it's like barely kind of spotting, and then a few weeks later it's really heavy. They got massive PMS. Like, this is all common stuff, but it's not really normal. Zoe, my wife, and I, we went to see Dr. Libby. You guys probably know who Dr. Libby is. She specializes in female hormones, and she was talking about her practice over the years, and out of the thousands of people that she's treated, she's only seen 3 women with a normal menstrual cycle. And most women don't even realize that they don't have a normal menstrual cycle. Most women don't even track it, right? So what is this attributed to? Long-term stress, long-term chronic underfeeding, long-term overexercising, right? We've seen an increase in osteoporosis in the last 30 years or so. And now it's not just affecting, this is like something that you normally get when you're the elderly, but when I was being mentored by James Laval, he's the doctor for the, one of the doctors for the national team in gymnastics in America, and he was seeing 12 and 13-year-olds with osteoporosis. And the reason is their coaches don't allow them to eat, and they're training 8 to 10 hours a day. And they would have a 13-year-old would do a backflip, land, and snap, her femur would snap in half because her bones are so brittle. Growth and development issues, hematological. So, we see stuff on labs, metabolic issues. We look at metabolic issues, cardiovascular issues. We see modulations in blood pressure and waking heart rate and HRV. We look at psychological issues where people are stressed and anxious and depressed. We see immune system issues, people getting sick all the time. Okay, so here's some other things you might see as far as training response. You get decreased training response. They're just not losing fat as effectively as we think they should. They're not getting as strong as they should. They're not growing muscle as they should. Their endurance sucks. Their strength sucks. Again, depression, irritability, concentration, coordination. Is this resounding? Are you thinking about clients that you're seeing this with? Yes, no? Maybe?
Sorry, my internet dropped out there just for a second. What did you say?
Oh, sorry. Like look at some of these things stemming off of this syndrome, and do you notice some of this stuff with your clients? Like, look at coordination. How many of your clients can barely chew gum and walk at the same time?
Definitely.
Yeah. What about decreased concentration? Like, they're counting the reps and they can't remember what rep they're on, or they can't remember how to do an exercise you just taught them like 5 minutes ago. How many of them are irritable and depressed? Like, shit, almost all of them. When they come to you, they're atrophied. They have low muscle strength. They have horrible performance. Their training response isn't as good as it should be, right? But this is all stemming from everything we've been talking about, especially the stress aspect. Okay, that's the female athlete triad. Okay, here's a simplified endocrine response in relative energy deficiency syndrome. So low immunity, high stress hormones, low thyroid. Okay, increased blood sugar, increased postprandial blood sugar, decreased insulin, so they can't get nutrients into the cell, insulin resistance. You look at like osteoporosis with low IGF-1, low estrogen, guys with low testosterone, low basal metabolic rate because of low thyroid, low cholesterol uptake, so your clients come in with dyslipidemia. Like, this is all of the pathological things that you're going to see with the clients that come into you. And we have a high capacity to drive the stuff in the right direction. We also have a high capacity drive to keep driving the stuff in the wrong direction. Okay, so you look at the bottom, we've got a cumulative energy deficit. So this is energy deficit over time, and then we have a cumulative endocrine dysfunction. Now, you can look at all these. We've got, osteoporosis starting at first, and we look at like a drop in leptin, so they're going to be hungry all the time. We've got a drop in T3s, so their metabolism's drop. We get an increase in cortisol. We go to, like, what about the reproduction? Low sperm count, low progesterone, low estrogen, low testosterone, body composition. Yeah, they're losing body fat, but they're also losing lean muscle. Now, if we look at girls who lose their menstrual cycle, how long have they been in a cumulative energy deficit before this happens? It's pretty far down the list, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you have, especially you girl trainers, man, that you train a lot and you're dieting all the time and all this, and, you're like, wow, I haven't had a normal period in 3 or 4 years, or you get somebody comes in that used to be a physique athlete or CrossFit, you're like, yeah, I haven't had a period in 5 years. You look at where that happens in this time domain, and you look at all the stuff that's happening as well before they even get to that point where they lose the period. And then eventually, if this goes on long enough, you see at the end, they're increasing body fat, and they're hardly eating anything. I had a lady, the first time I saw this, I had a lady that was about 160 kilos and short too. It was easier to jump over her than to run around her, right? And she was legit eating 500 calories a day, and she could not lose body fat. And it probably took me 18 months to 24 months to actually get her to lose weight. Now, when she started losing weight, she started losing it rapidly. But the first thing was I had to convince her to start eating 1,500 to 2,000 calories a day, and she was convinced that she would get fat, right? But she was already getting fat on 500 calories because her body's at a point where it's trying to hoard every piece of every little calorie she's eating. She's just trying to hold that onto her body because her body's not set up in a position where she can actually oxidize anything. But this happens over a very long time. By the time most of your clients come to you, do you guys ever have somebody that comes in to train with you and they're like, hey, I feel really healthy and awesome, I just want to work out?
Yeah, not really.
Like, that's a very rare thing. Like, you're going to have some people that do that, but the majority of your clients are coming in because, man, they're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. They don't like the way they look. They don't like the way they feel, so they're trying to get their shit together, or the doctor told them that they need to exercise, and they don't know what they're doing, so they come to see you. By the time they come to see you, they're probably pretty well messed up. So look at the bottom here with energy expenditure and versus energy intake. You can do a lot of training as long as you feed the training, and that's the problem. Is they're exercising more and more and more, but they're not raising their calories to fuel that energy expenditure. You'll see here, if you just raise the calories while they raise their exercise, then you don't have a problem because your energy's in balance. So the way I'm going to show you guys how to create diets, when you start creating that caloric model, we need to first look at not just their BMR, but we also need to look at all of their activity, and we got to add all the activity, and then we create a deficit from that. And what tends to happen is people will look at just basal metabolic requirement. They'll add a few calories on top of that, but they never add in all of the other stuff they're doing, like all the training. So common signs and symptoms of relative energy deficiency syndrome: irregular periods and missed menstrual cycles, low bone density, increased risk for osteoporosis, muscle aches or pains, fatigue, injuries, depression, anxiety, thyroid dysfunction. Thyroid dysfunction will lead to digestive issues and low body temperature, trouble sleeping. I think if you take this and make a questionnaire out of it and ask your client, there's a lot of people that are going to be ticking all these boxes. Okay, so when we look at calculating calories, the research shows it's a bit inconclusive, but it's around 22 to 30 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass. That seems to be kind of the sweet spot where if you go under that for any length of period of time, they are going to start getting metabolic issues. And some of the impacts of that is they're going to lose their metabolic rate, their concentration, their mood, their thyroid, their luteinizing hormones, control some of your sex hormones, your IGF-1, leptin. They're going to have increased cortisol, increased ghrelin, and increased cholesterol and trigs. So if you have lower leptin and increased ghrelin, how is that going to affect their ability to then follow a diet? They're going to be hungry all the time and more likely to binge and also make like worse choices in what they're actually eating, right? So the more you push, when we go back to that law of extremes, the more I push somebody in one direction, the more the body's going to push back in the other direction. They found pretty much the optimal for performance is about 45 calories per kilogram. Now, that's for performance. That's not for fat loss. But when we start looking at what the total energy expenditure is, we want to start thinking about the majority of the time trying to keep them above that 30 calories per kilogram. And then if we're going to go under that, start thinking about phasing that maybe low for 3 weeks and then maybe coming off of that for a week, right? That way we can negate some of the metabolic adaptations and we can limit some of the damage, right? So when you're calculating calories, you're going to look at your calories consumed for the day minus your exercise energy expenditure. Then you divide that by your kilograms of fat-free mass. So if I have a client that's you've got calories consumed, they're eating 2,000 calories, right? And let's say you take their body weight times 30, and that tells you that their threshold, lower threshold, for an 85 kilogram person is 2,550. Like that's probably what you don't want to go under for any length of time. If they're only eating 2,000 calories, then that's going to net 1,500 calories. That's at 17.65 calories per kilogram. Okay, that's almost 50% of what they actually need to fuel optimal health. Now, if we look at something being optimal, we look at, say, 30 to 45, okay, they're going to need around 3,825 calories. We take away 500 calories for training, 3,325. Then maybe we put a 500 calorie deficit on top of that, okay, 2,825 divided by 85, 33. Now we're above that threshold. Is that all making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, again, I'm not saying that they need to eat 30 to 33 calories per kilogram all the time, but if we look at a diet break, just understanding if they do like 2 or 3 weeks of an extreme diet, we're probably going to want to go back to 1 week of eating somewhere around this amount of calories, right? Number one, it increases compliancy because they're not dieting all the time. And number two, we're going to mitigate some of that metabolic adaptation and keep it from going too far in the wrong direction, right? So this is a typical industry protocol. I got this program. A girl did this, got fantastic results, and now she's binging all the time, and her weight's going up, and she's freaking out. She can't sleep. This is the type of stuff that happens if you don't understand nutrition. So 4 days of German body comp, so we're looking at about 1,200 calories a week, 14,000 steps. We look at about 4,900 calories a week, 30 minutes conditioning twice a week. That's 600 calories a week. So the weekly activity cost of all that is 6,700 calories a week. Okay, so the client was eating around 1,200 to 600 calories, 1,600 calories. So you're looking at 8,400 to 11,200 a week. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to adjust that for the activity. So we're going to take 8,400 minus 6,700. We take 11,200 minus 6,700. So that range adjusted is 1,700 to 450 calories. That's a week. So the daily average of what she's actually netting, 242 calories to 642 calories to try to run her body. So her net calories per kilogram per day was 5 to 13.
Crazy.
Now, what I'm imagining right now is most of you, your jaws are on your desk. Like, because will this produce results? Yes. And it produces great results for a good before and after. But what about the after the after? What about that? Like now, client was given no exit strategy. She went to another Muscle Nerds coach. The Muscle Nerd coach called me and said, look at this, mad as hell, because this should never have happened. And it's because this person does not understand this stuff. So you guys see why I get so bent and why I'm so passionate about teaching this stuff?
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Have you ever seen Clint Eastwood, Torino? I feel like just standing on my lawn, like, God, get off my lawn, kids. And I'm just like always getting bent and angry about this stuff. But like I said earlier, man, we're dealing with people's lives. Like, do you want to be the trainer that improves people's lives, or do you want to be the trainer that fucks people up, right? And yeah, this is great. You get a great before and after. This is perfect for your marketing. You're going to be very successful until people find out what happens to these people after this happens, right? And that's the thing. You never see the after pic. because no one's going to use that for marketing. And if they did, maybe if Zoe would let me start calling people out, maybe they would start changing what they're doing and stop messing people up, because I'm getting really tired of fixing people. But when you're looking at nutritional protocols, we want to make sure that they are eating enough for their body to run effectively. Okay, so this person realistically probably should have been eating a hell of a lot more than that, right? Like your threshold should be 10,300. So we probably could have added, another 1,000 calories a day. Client would have still gotten great results, but then they wouldn't have any blowback after it. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling, man. Mind-boggling. Okay, I've just got a few more slides for you. So we look at intermittent.
Sorry, brother. Is there an easier
Go
way
ahead.
we can work out that if we've got all the information like steps clients are doing, calories they're eating, and that kind of thing?
Wait, let me turn the volume up. I can barely hear you. What's that?
Sorry, man. Have you got any blueprints that we can work out all that stuff that you were just talking about, like how many steps they're doing, how many times they're training, their total calorie expenditure?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me write that down really quick, because I'll do that. I'll go ahead and give you guys a blueprint. That way you guys can look at this. But if you just follow,
awesome. Thanks, man.
So if you follow through some of this stuff, right, like if I say, all right, what's the minimum threshold I want to be at for maintenance? And we're looking at that 30 calories per kilogram. So multiply 30 calories per kilogram. So if I'm 100 kilos, that's 3,000 calories a day. Then I need to look at what they're doing, depending on what type of training they're doing. If they're weight training, you're probably looking at, if it's a standard weight training protocol of like 20 to 24 sets, they're probably doing, around 200, 250 calories. If they're doing really intensive, like CrossFit type stuff and Metcons, you're probably looking at more like 300 calories or so per 30 minutes. If you're doing jiu-jitsu, it's more like 450 per 30 minutes. A lot of the stuff you can find in Chronometer as far as what the output is. I personally would rather overfeed somebody a little bit, because I can always take a little bit of food away. Right? But I'll work on this. I'll give you guys some blueprints and like some like a flow chart type of thing to follow, so that you understand that, right? Yeah. The main thing is, man, like, you can get really fast results without starving somebody. And if we're going to starve somebody, just realize like you can do that as a strategy, but you can't do it for very long, right? If you've ever done like twice a day training, 3 times a day training, if you've ever done like Poliquin's super compensation training, where you're doing 2 full body workouts a day, 6 days in a row, so you're doing like 12 to 15 sessions a week, like you can use that as a really good tool. But you can't do it for more than a couple of weeks, because you'll start screwing yourself up. So you start thinking about that with your nutritional programming, that the lower the calories, the less time I can do that before I need to bring it back up. So with intermittent dieting, because this is a big topic right now, where people are talking about like the Matador study. They're talking about, okay, well, what does the research say on diet breaks? We don't really have a lot of solid research yet, especially not in trained people. And when you look at the Matador study, where they took a group and they did continuous dieting for 16 weeks. They did another group where they dieted for 32 weeks, but they alternated 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. I don't like that study, because I think that they should have done continuous. If everything was equal, they would have done the continuous dieting group for 32 weeks as well, but they would have cut the deficit in half. And that would have made more of an apples-to-apples type of comparison. One of the problems, too, is when we try to extrapolate results from some of these studies, they're using people who are obese and the people aren't training. So there's a study being done at a university of, I think it's Western Australia right now, where they're actually doing something where it's more apples to apples, and it's on trained subjects, not obese subjects. Because as we know, leaner people who are athletes in training, people that come to you guys that are trained really hard, we can't use an obese study to really determine how this is going to result with them, right? So we don't know as much about diets and refeeds as we think, right? So we can't really make conclusive statements on what's the best protocol. Now, in my experience, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or 2 weeks on, 1 week off, I've always seen the best results from that. The new IceCap study is 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and they're doing that for 16 weeks, and they have the continuous dieting group they're dieting for 12 weeks, and then they go back to maintenance for 4. So they're going to see what the difference is in, see if one is better than the other. Now, we do know that there are some benefits to intermittent dieting with diet breaks and refeeds and things like that. One, there's less attrition, meaning that people don't tend to drop out of those studies as much as other studies, as much as continuous dieting. You tend to have better adherence, and you get more positive feedback, right? But other than that, we're not sure which one's going to be better, whether continuous dieting at a lower deficit is going to be better, or if a more aggressive deficit with diet breaks is going to be better. So hopefully we'll know in the next few months, we'll get more clarity on what's going to be better, right? So there's the IceCap trial, 60 resistance-trained subjects. It's the largest athlete dieting study in Australia that's ever been done. 12 weeks of continuous dieting with a 4-week diet break at the end versus 3 weeks dieting and 1 week diet break. And I think the deficit is 35% is what they're doing. So what they're going to do is compare which one's better for fat loss, which one's better for muscle retention, which one's better for performance, which one's going to not have as much of a negative impact on the metabolic rate, also appetite, hormones, and the psychology of which one's easier to actually adhere to. I personally think that the intermittent dieting is going to be better psychologically, and it's a lot easier for people to diet on. And I can just tell you from personal experience, I'm the type of guy, I'll diet super hard for 3 weeks, and then I'll take 1 week break where I'll just go bananas and kind of wash, rinse, and repeat that. It's a lot easier for people to manage. So as I said, for my personal preference, 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Some of the strategies you look at, we talked about this before, 0.5 to 1% body weight loss per week. That's on average over time. Some weeks they may lose more, some weeks they lose less. The thing they want to focus on is what is your average weekly loss. If you're going to diet aggressively, no more than about a 30 to 35% deficit, okay? And that is not just nutrition, but you also have to think about training. If I'm training an hour a day, and that's 500 calorie deficit from 35% calories, I'm no longer in a 35% deficit. I'm now in like a 40, 45, 50% deficit or higher, as we saw in that case study, right? We want to use resistance exercise mainly to mitigate lean body mass losses. Okay? The way we keep people from losing mass while they're dieting is higher protein, 2.3 to 3.1 grams per kilogram per day, based on Eric Helms' research. Okay, we want to take that diet break, depending on how severe the calorie deficit is. If you're going more severe, you've got to take diet breaks faster. If it's less severe, that 30 to 35% deficit, then it might be every 4th week. And then we want to emphasize carbs during refeeds. You guys all good with that? Sorry, I went over time, 40 minutes, but
No, that's right. That's all good.
All good.
all right. Any questions? You guys get any value out of that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Quickly with the refeeds in the carbs. Like, say for example, you get to that week, you do 3 weeks of dieting, and then go to the week 1 of refeeding, and let's say you put some up to 500 grams of carbs. Do you just bump the calories up way more, or do you take from fats or protein? Like, how does that work?
You just, because you're wanting to go back to maintenance, so you just add. The most simple thing to do is add carbs back to maintenance. So let's say I have somebody eating, 22 calories per carb, or 22 calories per kilogram is what I'm netting over time after I take size and also the deficit and all that. When I go to my maintenance week, I'm just going to add as many carbs as I need to get back to 30 to 33 calories per kilogram. And then I have them do that for a week, and then we go right back to low-calorie dieting. But just
no worries.
Always make sure you're thinking about how much they're training. If they train more, they have to add that food back. If they don't add that food back, then that deficit starts getting larger and larger, and it gets to the point where, as we saw, like 5 to 13 calories per kilogram is nothing. That's just starving themselves. And then there's no, like, when we look at it that way and do the math, we're like, well, there's no wonder these people their body's not working, they're tired, issues with thyroid and all that, because we're not taking into account all of the energy output. Any more questions?
No, it's all good for me. Thank you very much for that.
All right, guys. Just download. We'll get it up to, I'll put it on Vimeo and then give you guys a link for it, okay? Or if I can. I don't have it from here, but I'll figure out a way so that you guys have a copy of it, and maybe I'll put it on Vimeo where you can download it too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
We'll
mate.
see you.